In this video, we're covering 4 forgotten metrics that you should be watching in your nonprofit. Let's get into it.
Hey everyone, we are Ted and Lisa Snyder, nonprofit consultants, because we believe a better world needs healthier nonprofits. Now, there are so many metrics within nonprofits that people watch for. And usually it's how much money you're bringing in, how many people you're helping, those really important things. But what we've noticed from working with various nonprofits is there are a few metrics that get forgotten. They kind of get left off to the side, and they're ones that can really help your organization if you can get these going in a good direction. But it's hard to make adjustments if you don't even know to be watching for them. So that's what we're talking about today.
All right, so let's just jump in. Number 1, the number of individual volunteers. So we're not talking about team sizes for individual teams, because that number can get blurred if you've got people who serve on multiple different teams, right? And we're not talking about man hours, because you could have 100 volunteer hours that were served last week by 2 people. So we're looking at the number of individual volunteers, and this is because volunteerism drives so many other metrics forward. It's been shown across the board that the more volunteers an organization can muster, it actually helps donations increase, it helps word of mouth increase, it helps all these other aspects of the organization to grow. And so if you're tracking the number of individual volunteers joining in to help your organization, whether that's a really highly skilled volunteer or you create positions kind of that are like low skill, low commitment volunteer positions, if you're tracking that number, then you can actually make that number go up and therefore improve the rest of the organization.
Yeah, we've seen some organizations that focus on volunteers that are serving at least a certain number of hours a week. And that's fine, but knowing what the overall individual volunteer number is allows you to have people who are serving one time, who are serving a couple times every once in a while, because you want those people in your organization too, because they're going to eventually grow into more substantial roles, hopefully, if you're bringing them through that process. The other reason that this is important is because if you have multiple teams and you're like, this team has 5 people and this team has 5 people and this team has 5 people, but one person is serving on each team or serving on every single team, that can look like you have a lot more volunteers than you actually do. Additionally, not all team leaders talk to each other, so they might not even realize that they have a volunteer who is serving in multiple different areas.
Yeah.
There's one organization we were working with ages ago, and they had a volunteer who was serving, I think, on 4 different teams. And I had to let someone know because they just weren't looking as a whole at who all the individual volunteers were. Everyone was so focused on their own team and no one had the bird's eye view. And eventually when this volunteer got worn out because she was serving a decent amount on each team and everyone thought they were being reasonable with the amount of time that she was there, when she got worn out, every team had a substantial gap because she was in leadership in 2 of the teams, was serving in 4 different teams, and it was kind of a mess. And you don't know that unless you recognize how many individual volunteers you have. And so that's another huge thing that comes out of this is you actually start to notice who's serving where and who's serving a few too many places.
Yeah, and especially if like in that situation where you have somebody who's leading teams, that can be a heavy weight for a volunteer to carry. So if you've got people who are leading multiple teams, you want to be very aware of that. You want to be tracking, who these people are, how much time they're putting in, how much time they should be putting in. Some people have a tendency to just overserve. That's just how they're wired up. And so you as a leader, it's your responsibility to just kind of help coach them to make decisions that can help them have longevity in your organization rather than serve really, really hard for 2 months and then never be able to help out again. You would rather them serve, a reasonable amount for a couple years. That would be beneficial.
Yeah. Number 2, the number of new individual donors. A lot of times organizations look at how many donations they've received. And you might have a month where you're thinking, oh my gosh, we just raised an extra $5,000 last month. And the whole $5,000 came from one donor. It's really important to be tracking the number of new individual donors across the board, whether they're giving $1 or $10,000, because this is going to give you a really good idea of how well your marketing is doing, how well your word of mouth is doing, how well you're actually engaging with people in and outside of your community. and how well you're telling stories and telling them the metrics that matter so that they want to give to your organization.
Yeah, we talk a lot about lead and lag indicators, and what a lot of organizations do is they pay attention to the lag indicators, the metrics that show up at the end of the line, like how much money did we raise. Now that's a good thing to track because you want to know how much money you have in the bank account, but the lead indicator when you're tracking that actually shows you a valuable piece of information. And this one specifically, number of new individual donors, is a measurement of growth of your organization, where the amount of money can go up and down. As a lag indicator, the amount of money coming in can go up and down, but that doesn't necessarily show you growth. That just shows you how much money came in. Like you want to be measuring how many new people are hearing about us, catching the inspiration of the stories that we're telling, and like wanting to be a part of what we're doing.
And understanding what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we talk about what we're doing, but that doesn't mean that it's translating correctly between our mouths and people's ears.
Right.
We understand so much about our own organizations that sometimes it just gets lost in translation.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that new individual donor, highly important. It's interesting because it is a lag indicator for a lot of the marketing, but it's a lead indicator for a lot of future giving. So it's a very pivotal number. And if you just go from all marketing efforts to the total amount of donations at whatever point, it's hard to figure out where to make adjustments and really figure out what's actually working because there's just way too much data.
Number 3 is similar to number 2, and that is the number of regular donors, the ones that you have retained. You want to keep track of this just as much as you're tracking new individual donors, because the idea is that someone will give once, give twice, maybe make it a regular thing. They're giving monthly, or maybe they're giving they're giving like a large amount one time a year, like especially if they're a business owner and they're wanting to sponsor an event or something. You want to track donors that you have had in the past and track how often or what they're doing to stay consistent and regular, because that's showing you a different kind of lead indicator of how some people will give for a first time. Like they'll make a first time gift because they're like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to be a part of this.
I'll throw $20 at it, see what happens.
But when somebody says, I'm going to make a second time gift or a fourth time gift or a 10th time gift, that tells you a lot about how well you're communicating the vision, how well you're following through on the vision. It tells you a lot about how you're doing it as an organization when you have been able to retain donors because they feel like their money actually is accomplishing something.
Yep. And just like those individual donors, these are the donors who you've managed to keep and that you've managed to keep committed to your organization. This will tell you a lot about how your follow-up is, how your ongoing communication is. Too often, nonprofits speak about the big flashy gifts that happen one time, and they forget to actually do the work of just staying in regular contact with people. And so you might get an influx where it's like, okay, we're going to do a push and see how many new people we can tell about our organization and get these new donors. But if you're not keeping them, or if you're not helping build their commitment over time by giving them more information that they care about your organization, then that first part is like, it was good for a season, but it didn't necessarily help you long term. So the kept and committed is really important. I think as nonprofit leaders, it's really easy to undervalue the people who are simply stable in terms of their support for your organization.
It's true. You hear a lot about the people who are having a problem with your organization, and you hear a lot about the people who are like super duper excited and like fresh. But the ones who are like, I am a brick in the wall, like I am one of many and I am stuck here and I am with you, they kind of blend into the scenery a lot. And so it's really important to keep it front of mind for you as a leader that they're there, that what they're doing is extremely important, and that reminds you then to value them and make sure that they are getting what they hope to get out of being a donor.
Yeah, and to celebrate them, because what you celebrate, other people naturally replicate. And if you just want the flashy one-time donors, you might celebrate those, and some people might be like, oh, I'm going to drop a big thing, but then they might just slink away after a bit after that celebration is done. But if you're routinely not just praising the first and second gifts, but also the 100th gifts, That lets people know here we value people who stick and stay with our organization, and we want more people who are just willing to be with us in this. And that long term is highly, highly, highly valuable.
That just made me think of an example of how that could play out so well. Even if someone had given a $1 donation, but they, over the course of time, had given 100 $1 donations, being able to say, like, hey, we just wanted to celebrate and thank so-and-so for making their 100th donation. It doesn't matter the money amount. The fact that they were so consistent is now being celebrated, and that will increase that number of regular donors because people are like, I want to make 100 different donations.
Yeah, it inspires people, and it makes people think, wow, this person has given 100 donations. There must be something special here, because that's very unique. So number 4, the number of new people introduced to you by your people. Now, your people could be volunteers, donors, staff members, whoever they may be, but the number of new people being introduced to you while like you're at your organization or at an event, or introduced you in some capacity about the organization that you're leading, either that you're totally leading or that you're leading within.
So this number is really, really important because it tells you that people have bought into how important the organization is, and they want to find any way they can to help get more people on board. And when they're introducing them to you, that's a lead indicator, because what you then do with the conversation is important. But if you're tracking how many people are coming to you, and it's not very much, you can say, okay, what are we doing that is keeping people from wanting to introduce their friend to me, from wanting to introduce their mom to me? Like, what am I doing that's keeping people at bay rather than like welcoming people and celebrating that so much that people are just like, hey, I give to this organization, you need to talk to this person.
Yeah. And as you can get this number increase, this will actually directly influence how many overall volunteers you have, the number of individual new donors that you get. If you can retain them, it'll increase your regular donors. This amount of people, when you have other people who are bringing people into the organization and then introducing them to you as a leader, you might be leading in the middle of an organization, and even the volunteers, donors, or staff, or the people who are highly committed to your area, if they're consistently bringing people to you and being like, hey, I really want you to meet so-and-so, that's a huge indicator that whatever it is that you're doing, people are looking at it going, I'm willing to share this with other people, and I value it, and I value your input as a leader enough that I want other people to know you. Super, super huge. I remember there were times that when someone would be like, hey, I brought my friend and I just wanted them to meet you really quick. That might sound small in the moment, but it's a huge honor to have enough impact in someone's life that they feel the need to bring someone to meet you so that now their friend is connected to you too. So never take that as an interruption, but take that as a very, very high honor, and make sure that you're treating those relationships and those introductions very, very well, because that will have a massive impact on the rest of your organization.
Yeah, someone making an introduction to you is them putting the reputation on the line, their reputation at stake. They wouldn't be doing it if they felt like your organization was trash, you know? So when they do that, it is a really, really big deal. And it's a thing that a lot of for-profit companies really try to figure out. Have you ever filled out one of those surveys that's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend this to a friend? They only measure the 10s that come in. The 9s that come in, they're like, that doesn't count. We're looking for 10s because that means that this person is so psyched about our product or service that they're actually going to bring someone to us. And it's a powerful, powerful metric.
Yep. Now, I will say for this one, you cannot try and manipulate this if you want the number to mean anything.
Yeah.
So you can't go to your volunteers and be like, hey, I'd like to meet 3 of your friends this week. This has to be something that you are measuring, but you have told absolutely no one about, so that you can get an accurate read for how people are just naturally doing this. Because too often, the minute we start measuring metrics, the metrics become useless because we manipulate.
Yeah.
Well, once you start measuring, it's easy to start manipulating.
Yes.
And so be very, very careful about that. But this metric can do huge wonders if you can get people to start introducing people to you without you ever telling them that you're measuring this.
Or telling them that you expect them to introduce people to you, or
Or
whatever.
that you're even hoping for. Don't mention it. Just measure it.
Just be so awesome as an organization, as a leader, that it naturally happens. Then measure it.
All right. So with that, we do have an honorable mention, and that is how much time, how many hours is spent in meetings. This can be for you, staff members, donors, volunteers, board meetings, all the meetings. How much time is spent in meetings? And this is kind of a bigger subject, so rather than jumping in wholly, we are going to recommend this video. It's going to be showing up on the screen. That's 4 strategies for effective meetings, because they are important, but we need them to be effective so that we can get our organizations moving forward and in the right direction. So we'll see you over there.